Welcome to Duncan Thorin Shield's YouTube channel. I managed to con Duncan into convincing his friend to pay me thousands and thousands of dollars as a professional Counter-Strike player, so maybe he can convince you that some of his analysis is correct.
You know that feeling when you find some old snacks that you'd left out and you'd forgotten about completely, but you're hoping they're still going to be good because you're hungry and you don't have any fruit like big apples around anywhere? Well, if you have a product or service you want to advertise to over 250,000 here on YouTube who consume over 7 figures worth of minutes per month on this YouTube channel, then hit the digits and make the call on that deal. Now, Snax has joined mousesports, replacing STYKO, and he will be playing in place of STYKO at ESL1 Cologne next week. So as usual, we're going to break this down in the traditional formula. And let's look, instead this time, since the significance is that he's coming from mousesports, let's look at the Virtus.pro side first. Letting Snax go. Is that the right move? For my money, when you add it all up, his time as an in-game leader soured him to the team to some degree and actually spoiled some of the chemistry of the team. To be fair, in his words, some of it was Neo as well, who also wasn't able to live up to some kind of a star billing and having some resources in space. And so it was a mixture of both, but certainly acting that way in public suggested that there was some tensions within the team. You have to cut someone anyway, so it makes sense that he might be one of them. Then you look at the fact that he didn't seem as motivated ever since his time as an in-game leader when the team really had problems. His level dropped off a lot over the last year and a half. And they're a team that right now, one of the things they need is fragging in Virtus.pro. They've got the tactics, they've got the veteran players, they even have a couple of maps they can play on and be half decent in the meta of. What they need is a superstar player, some star fragging. It's just Bialy out there on his own most of the time. So I think this was the right move overall. I also think they should still cut Neo, and I would have also suggested cutting Neo. But then again, I don't know who you would replace Neo with, and it still wouldn't solve the problem of what's going on with Snax. So I think it was the right move. I think it also now frees them up to get Snatchy from AGO or to get some other talent and become a better team overall. Now, in terms of mousesports, initially replacing STYKO, I don't think that's as clear an upgrade or correct move as many people are going to think or imply, partly because I think a lot of people are incredibly biased over the fact that they like the other players in the team, and then they see the fact that Mouse doesn't win every tournament, and so they blame STYKO. Also, it's that classic scrub mentality of like, he's the worst player in the team and the least skilled player in the team, therefore let's all bang on him for everything he does wrong, and haha, he failed in this way. I actually think if you look at this team, they've been a consistently good team, they've won titles. Well, you know what? The chemistry that has produced that includes every player in the team. There's no knowing the impact that this team will have in terms of team balance, role balance, performance balance when STYKO leaves. You replace 20% of a lineup, you can have a drastic variance even if the player coming in is objectively or subjectively considered better than the player he's replacing. Then you got to look at the fact that STYKO's role was he really was playing as a true support player. He had the mentality that he was a support player, that he is there to create space for other people, to sacrifice himself, to facilitate their greatness, to do tough jobs that won't get a lot of shine and people won't give you praise for, but might be necessary, but invisible to outsiders, observers, opponents, but end up helping that star player like Rob's have an amazing game, Oscar to get into position, Sonny to be able to pull off an amazing flank or push in at a certain time. You never know what STYKO's doing to help and allow that to happen. And I think some of those players, Rops and Sonny, they're too young or too inexperienced to necessarily themselves know it or appreciate it right now until STYKO is gone. But with that said, I would definitely agree that if you're mousesports and you have to make a move, which I personally don't think you did, but if you want to get to number one, you probably did. If you have to make a move, okay, you know what? He is the only player I think you could reasonably replace. Unless you were getting Simple or Nico or Cold Zero, you can't really replace the 3-star players. Then you look at the in-game leader. Unless you're getting a pure in-game leader like an Existence or an MSL, there's not really any point replacing Chris J. He's done a very competent job with this group. He's actually someone who, in terms of it as an individual player, is one of the best in-game leaders we have right now, as you saw in the final at ESL1 Belo Horizonte. He's someone who's actually being very useful individually as an in-game leader. You see with some of that aggressive entry fragging when his team need a frag and they kind of don't have a play and everyone else is slowed down and they've got hesitancy plaguing their game. So I think And for me, as a result, you add in that individual ability. He's the main reason they won that Star Series Season 4 title for my money. Otherwise, Navi almost certainly would have taken that trophy away on the back of Simple's performance. Chris J really helped turn that around with that Mirage game. Now, in terms of adding Snax, whether that's right or wrong, right? The problem with this one is I feel like this is one of the closest ones I've ever seen. Because on the positive side, I could see it working. He's a talented player. He's not going to be required to be a star in this team, the assumption would go. He brings an X factor to the team with the unpredictable nature of his play, the fact he is creative in terms of what he'll do in the game. He's quite a ballsy player. These are all things that you couldn't say about someone like STYKO. Also, Snax is a veteran. He's not someone who needs to be trained up in the game. He's played many, many years. He's not going to get as nervous in stage scenarios. He's been deep in majors. Something like STYKO hasn't done that. Also, you got to add in, he's a champion. He has won before. To some degree, he knows what it takes to win. It knows what it's like to win, knows what it's like to be in the situation where you might win or you might lose everything. Again, people like STYKO, okay, they have in some degrees, but not in majors, not in the biggest tournaments ever. They have and they haven't. I could also, unfortunately, though... Oh, one last detail in terms of positive. Another reason is, this is not really something I can be sure of, but perhaps this gives Snax motivation to reinvent his role, to become a useful player in a different sense, to not have the same pressure upon him. Because you contrast that with him trying to be a star player in Virtus.pro for the last year, that feels like that's done. Now, the downside is I could also see this going badly. And I know it's close to a 50-50, but part of me feels like I might even edge to the bad side that it's going to be a 60-40 that it doesn't work out. Because the first assumption people have that may yet prove to be faulty is that this is a one-for-one trade. So Snax comes into mouz sports, replacing STYKO, and he's going to take STYKO's role, STYKO's spots, play like STYKO does. That is not for sure at all. If he comes in and he thinks he's going to be a star player, and this is going to be some sort of a phase scenario with a bunch of star players, and he's maybe even going to be a focal point of the team and get his old spots and his old style of play, that's where I could easily see it upsetting the balance. It is also far from, in any sense, guaranteed he can do that anymore. He was unable to in Virtus.pro, even when he was the in-game leader and had more say over what he was going to do. Was unable to play that star player role, hasn't been a real star in the true sense of like top 10, top 15 player in the world for over a year and a half. So I don't know that he could do it. And I certainly right now don't think he could do it better than the current stars that mouz has. So my problem there is not only could he mess up the balance of those stars, which at the moment are very complementary in their nature. They seem to work together pretty well. They almost do it by committee and take turns as to who carries and on what map. So that's part of the big strength for mouz, in my opinion. They really are a poor man's phase in that respect. But if he comes in and starts trying to play a star role, even Beyond might not be able to do it himself, that could limit one of those stars. And quite frankly, with how their star trio works right now, I wouldn't want them to mess that balance at all. I don't want to see Oscar in a scenario where he can't be the main focal point and AWP in the same way and doesn't have someone like STYKO to create space for him, get him into position, drop him a weapon. I wouldn't want to see Sonny's messed up in terms of his ability to use his timing, his fantastic T-sides. I wouldn't want Rops, still a young player, still developing, finding his identity, to be in any way limited from sowing his wild oats and going wild as a star player and trying to become the true star player for mouz sports. Because that's the one part people didn't consider about the mouz sports squad. They are a team, much like Team Liquid, which actually is stuck at the A tier. They're like second to third to fourth to fifth, like very good, but not world championship level. But they could potentially have made the leap up, just as in Team Liquid, Twists could do it, a very young player. Rops is so young, not just in age, but experience in the game. He really could improve in 6 months and become a superstar player. And now you've got Oscar and Rops at a superstar level. And that could be enough to make you number one at this point in time without roster moves. So again, you don't want to mess with Rops, even though he's the younger guy. And sure, his time might come in a few years. You don't necessarily want to limit him entirely. The question for Snax is, if he is replacing STYKO in his roles, can he do supportive, facilitating type shit? Because if he can't, that's going to put immense pressure on Chris J. Right now, Chris J also benefits from STYKO, where he doesn't always have to do the tough things himself, but he often puts himself in those scenarios. So I don't know what more Chris J can give right now. I don't think you can ask him to give more. And if the others are all trying to be fraggers, that's going to be a problem because he's already spread pretty thin in all regards. Then you look at Snax as the profile of the type of player he is. Okay, here's the thing. He's one of those players I would divide between cerebral and intuitive. I don't think I would describe him as a cerebral player. I don't think he couldn't describe a lot of the brilliant shit that he does and why he did a play and what the correct angle was and why the percentage was going to work out and this would be an efficient play. I think he's a very intuitive player and he has a feel for when he can do things and the resistance of the opponent and where space is and what he can do and what a great timing is. But I don't know that he could articulate it and that he can necessarily bring that to being a supportive type player or bring his old style of play, make that work in the supportive element of the team. He is used to being a star player in Virtus.pro his entire time. Contrast that with another all-time great intuitive player who's a star player, one of the best of all time, but fell off and tried to become a more supportive element in Get Right, in NIP. Hasn't really been working for him. He hasn't really shone in that role, quite frankly. People take for granted that star players can swap to being supports. They can't necessarily, and when they do and they succeed as much or more in that new role, that's why I laud them when they're a Zipnix and NBK, Kiyashima even in phase and think what a fantastic job they've done overall there. Likewise, people think of players like TACO and STYKO and don't realize that these guys being dedicated supports and doing that role for a long time takes something out of them, takes a toll and deserves plaudits, even though individually they're not mad skilled players or super fraggers, although STYKO's certainly a more skilled player than TACO in terms of his potential if you put him on a different squad. I'll also add in that there's a cultural and attitude shift also in Snax. Snax at times, at least in Virtus.pro, sure, a tough scenario, has been somewhat grumpy, has been a bit flippant, has been a bit nonchalant, seemed like he checked out and didn't care. Well, first of all, the mouse sports guys are grinders. They're guys coming up as underdogs who weren't at the top, hadn't had their chance at the top, and are hungry for it. So they're very contrasting in that sense. Then you've got to add in, okay, they're actually quite a fun team to some degree. I know it doesn't make sense because some of them seem super silent, but if you catch them by themselves, yeah, they actually are guys who can have fun and seem like they have a good attitude in the team. Snax has a sense of humor, certainly, but he's got a bit of a weird sense of humor. I'm not entirely sure how that'll vibe. He's had motivation issues. This is a team that's supposed to be hungry, supposed to be wanting to do it. Oscar already gets his own criticism when he didn't want to attend Bola Horizonte and himself has had minor motivation issues. So I'm not entirely sure how the mesh will be in that sense, especially because Snax is coming from all Polish teams where he's surrounded by his countrymen. You can take for granted that culture is going to have similarities and you played with the same four players for so many years. So as a result, you were very used to their mentality and them understanding what you meant. Now, in terms of mouse sports, this is a risk, a drastic risk, to try and reach the top. They don't want to be a number 3, number 4, number 5 team and just be good and make semis and finals and win a small title or the occasional title. They want to be number 1. Now, the problem with that is the trajectory for them as a team isn't necessarily be number 1, right? Look at this squad of players. Rops was stuck in Estonia, wasn't even a pro player with no pro experience. Sonny stuck in Finland or playing in low-level European teams where he's never going to be a champion. And he's a good player, but is he good enough to be the best player on one of those teams and be one of the best in the world as a team or one of the best individual players? Probably not. It's probably a bit of a stretch. He's more like a top 20, top 30 player if things work out well for him and more suited to be a complementary player in terms of a star, like a second or a third star like he is in this team. You look at Oscar, fabulous player, very talented, but his region doesn't allow him to be in an elite level team that could win majors and big championships. So he comes over. He's also got a weird personality, so he sort of needs to be around those underdogs who aren't going to question him and push him as much. This is the ideal team for them. And in the context of where they come from, they're an amazing team. Relative to where they come from, they are overachievers, especially for both how much they're paid, not very high salary for a top team that accomplishing results like they are, and where they've come from geographically and in terms of their careers and where they're at in their lives. Oscar, an older guy, Rops, a younger guy. Problem here is, I personally, if I could have made any move here, money being no option and the player saying yes, I would have rather had MBK come because that would be a 1-for-1 swap. I think he brings all the positives that a Snax does, but he also can play the role without messing up the balance and might even be able to make Mouse better overall. That would be the ideal one. Admittedly, if it's going to be $800,000 to buy him out, I'm not surprised Mouse Sports is not doing that. There are also other players, obviously, you could have brought in this equation. I mean, I can think of a few. But okay, were they that reasonable to that, or likely that it was going to happen? People have said Apex was going to come in. I'm not entirely sure how that would have worked, because I think that would have messed up the balance of the other players. But okay, maybe it would to some degree. I think all in all, it's not a terrible move. I also think you look at it, it to some degree extends the phase analogy even further. If you look at the phase team that had Olofmeister. So remember, Mouse Sports is the poor man's phase. Well, now Snax is trying to come in and presumably become an Olofmeister. Go from a star player to a supportive player role you haven't done before, but try and make it work. You even can contrast the rest of the players. So Chris J, similar to Carrigan, formerly a star or semi-star player, in Carrigan's case in 1.6, primarily an AWPer in the past, has to be a secondary or tertiary AWPer, takes on the in-game leadership role, gives up his individual game because he has the other stars in the team, running a looser style of system with basic reads. You've got Oscar playing the Guardian primary AWPer role, one of the best players in the world, usually the player you need to play very well if you want to win championships. Ropsk, I guess, can go and be the Nico because he's coming from a very underdeveloped region. He's the only really good player in his region. He's a pretty skilled player. Admittedly, he's like Nico 2 or 3 years ago. He hasn't really gotten to the level that Nico is right now, but then Nico's developed. And I guess Sonny is actually a pretty decent analogy for Rain, I reckon, because I think on the T side, they're playing similar spots, similar kind of timing approach, pretty good AK. They're not going to go off all the time, but they're going to have one map where they're going to dominate and they can really put you over the top. And then you have a really skilled lineup if that support's good, as Olof was in phase and Snax is going to try to be now. On the other side of the equation for VP, I think this is a very exciting move. I think it opens possibilities to have a totally new era and style of play. I think Bialy was their best player in the last year or so anyway, so they haven't lost their main talent, but they've opened up room to bring in some more talent. Pasha had improved over the last year, and I think having someone more motivated come in could also help him with his issues. Neo gets some breathing room as an IGL to at least try a new lineup for a few months before they replace him. And now Mihu isn't the new guy. He isn't the fifth, where in NIP, when you had the original core of 4 and then that fifth who felt like he was on the chopping block all the time. Similarly, he's not the guy where he's the one who inserted himself into that legendary team that had been around since the end of 2013. Now they can bring in someone else and there can be another new guy. And now he just gets to play his role and maybe someone comes in as a star fragger and VP can finally become a legit top 10, moving towards top 5 team in the world again. Probably never going to be number 1 team in the world if we're being honest. This video was supported by Dean Tanglis, Gardner Wilson, Andreas Snazore Westerlund, Alex Adams, Mikkel Hansen, Bash, Daniel Yordanov, Yordan Tsenkov, TTMXMP, VeXii, HawpT, Robert Baxter, Travis Greb, and a special thanks to Jerky's Minion. Do you want to get teasers for my upcoming work? Find out who's coming next, what topics are being discussed? Do you want to suggest a topic or a guest to appear on one of my shows or in one of my videos? Would you like to ask a question in my monthly Patreon AMA, or perhaps even discuss esports as part of a discussion show I run on a monthly basis? Donators can also discuss the topics expounded upon in my videos with me and the other patrons on our Patreon page. All of this and more at the Patreon link below.